and we will move now into the question and answer session. In order to comply with regulations, we know the questions in advance, and the questioners know who they are. So I will invite you by name to ask your question, and if you wouldn't mind just approaching the mic that's nearest to you, and we'll move from there. Okay, so the first question comes from Niall Robb, who's a PhD student in politics here. Thanks, Niall.
So thank you, Vice President Šefčovič, for your speech and for being here today. And welcome to Northern Ireland on your first trip. As Katie says, my name is Niall Robb and I'm a PhD student. I work with David, who's my supervisor, on my project looking at the role of civil society and business in the Brexit negotiations. So in that vein, it would be remiss of me not to ask about civil society and business engagement. As we know, these groups can be powerful sources of information for policymakers and officials like yourself, and they can also be important intermediaries with the ability to communicate directly to their members and to the wider public their experience of a policy or set of arrangements. Could you please outline your long-term strategy for engaging with civil society and business in Northern Ireland, and your view on the role that this plays, if any, in both successfully implementing the withdrawal agreement and the protocol, and securing the widest possible support for them, particularly in the context of the democratic consent vote in 2024? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Niall, for that question, and I think that Professor provided very good pieces of advice, and it was an excellent answer with the thrust of what I believe we should discuss very intensely and closely with our UK partners. I totally agree with you that if it comes to the involvement of civic society, business stakeholders, elected representatives, there is enormous, not only the wealth of information, because all of them, they know much better the situation on the ground, but there is also creation something like a feeling of common effort, like this is a joint task, like this creates a kind of esprit de corps that we are working on these very important issues linked to the present and the future of the country, of the nation together. And I can tell you that in the discussions I had yesterday and in many of our previous interactions with Katie and the civic society representatives, which we did online, there is indeed enormous interest to be involved, to be consulted, to discuss all these matters, and I think that we should really use that opportunity as much as possible. And honestly, I hope that by September of 2021, we would be much further ahead in, establishing the parameters, how these discussions, consultations could take place, what would be the structure. But as you know very well, because I'm sure you are a very good PhD student, and I think you follow the political developments very closely, we are still kind of discussing the basics. If the protocol should be fully implemented, how and why, and so on and so forth. So I think that was one of the reasons why very important question you raised is a little bit lagging behind. So I can tell you what I suggested and proposed yesterday, be it to the business leaders, civic society, or Northern Irish political representatives. With the business group, we decided to look for the best possible way of very flexible and more structured forum for the discussions. I suggested that right now we should focus on what are the most pressing issues, what are the concrete obstacles, concrete problems that they are facing when doing business between GB and Northern Ireland, between Northern Ireland, Ireland, and of course in the business context worldwide. And I told them let's use a bit of a startup mentality here. I would like to see not only the problems but also the suggestions, how we want to solve these issues, because you know the framework of the protocol already very well. So what do you suggest, how we can do that? And we will be very quick in responding, because I think that we shouldn't drag this process on and on, because longer we are debating, discussing more pressure on the stability and predictability of the environment is exerted here, and therefore I would like to really move very quickly. I have to tell you that I was really moved by all the statements and interventions I heard in the meeting with the Human Rights Commission, representatives of Women's Center and civic society, how important it is for these representatives to work very closely with the EU on Article 2, on human rights, inequality issues, on prospects of better education, on intercommunal peace, on reconciliation, on working within the communities to make sure that the prospects of the future are brighter and brighter. And there was enormous interest of cooperating closely with us as well, and we are looking what would be the best, again, structured way how to cooperate. And then we have already the tools which I think we should use better. As you know, under the protocol, there is the special body, Joint Consultative Working Group, where we are presenting what's happening in the EU, what are the plans, where we are with the legislative process of the most important proposals on the table, and we started to use it. But I think that we are learning how to do that from both sides, from the EU, from the UK, and from the Northern Ireland. And this would be also one of my main takeaway of yesterday and today. There is enormous interest for having this better involvement, more structured for the discussion. And of course, I will discuss it with my counterpart, Lord Frost, how to do it together, because I think we indeed have to do it together. And it applies to the way how we would communicate, but also it applies to the transparency. Because also the suggestions you made and Professor made just a couple of minutes ago, to be more transparent about the agenda, about the minutes of the meetings, about what and how it was being discussed. This is something what we have to agree together. As you know, we are a very open administration in the European Union, so we would be ready to go as far as our UK partners. And I think that the call for going further in that direction is very clear here, and we will discuss it with the Northern Irish representatives of all the sectors I mentioned. We'll discuss it with our UK counterparts, and also we'll reflect in the Commission how to do it in the most flexible and useful way, so we can really have these genuinely good discussions and debates.
Thank you very much. Our next question comes from Dr. Billy Melo-Arojo, who is a lecturer in the School of Law, and he's also a colleague on the Post-Brexit Governance NI project. Thanks, Billy.
Sorry, Kate, I jumped the gun there. Good morning. Welcome to Northern Ireland, and my apologies in advance for what is perhaps an overly specific question. I wanted to ask you whether there is a willingness to explore, or whether it's currently being explored, the possibility of applying a at-risk regime in relation to regulatory compliance checks on goods traded between GB, Great Britain, and Northern Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for your question, because it's very important indeed. As you know, in the command paper, the UK wants to remove customs duties and checks and replace them by an alternative system which would imply risk assessment for goods destined to Northern Ireland. And I can tell you that in our discussions with the UK on the command paper, we are of course listening very carefully to the explanations on this point, how it would work, how this can be done. I can tell you that we are in favor of facilitating the process, but not entirely removing customs check, because this would mean that we would stay within the logic of the protocol, but at the same time we will be dealing with the issues of the implementation. And after my yesterday discussions with business leaders and politicians, I can also tell you that I understand very well that there is a particular need to alleviate the burden on small GB traders supplying Northern Ireland. We are ready and willing to look into it, and we will continue the discussions with our UK partners and also with NI stakeholders in this regard.
Thank you. The next question comes from Dr. Vivian Gravi, who's a lecturer in the School of History, Anthropology, Politics and Philosophy here, and very valued member of several post-Brexit clinics that we've been holding in Queen's for the past few years. Thanks, Vivian.
Thank you, Katie. Welcome to Belfast. As Katie mentioned, I'm a lecturer here, but I'm also co-chair of Brexit and Environment, which is a network of academics looking at the impact of Brexit on the environment, both in the UK and the EU. And as such, I wanted to ask you about the dynamic nature of the protocol, what can be added in Annex 2, and the impact it may have on environmental action. As the EU is debating its carbon border adjustment mechanism as part of the Fit for 55 initiative, would it be possible to clarify whether the EU considers that CBAM should be inside the scope of the protocol, whether this has been agreed with the UK government, and how do you see CBAM working in practice in Northern Ireland? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivian. I think this would be one of the issues which I think would be extremely hotly debated the upcoming COP. And I'm sure that you know very well the reasoning of the EU behind introducing carbon border adjustment mechanism, or another Brussels abbreviation, CBAM. The reason for that was that the European Union wants to be the first carbon neutral economy in the world already by 2050. And you probably know that in my previous mandate I was responsible for Energy Union, and it was at that time when we've been negotiating the Paris Agreement, and I was presenting the proposals how to cut CO2 emission by 2030 by 40%. At that time, it looked like enormous task, I would say, a la limit of technological possibility. But I think a few years later, when again we listened to the science and look at what are the prospects ahead of ourselves, we just realized that the effort which we've been putting into our legislation is simply not sufficient. That by cutting CO2 emissions by minus 40% by 2030, we would never make it to the carbon neutrality by the mid-century, and simply we have to accelerate as much as possible. And therefore, as you know, we adopted this big package. I think most probably this was the biggest legislative package this Commission will adopt, where we are going across the board and we are going to cut the CO2 emission by minus 55% already in 9 years. And of course, it entails huge changes to the emission trading schemes. We have to see how to use better emission allowances for transport, for heating, for cooling, and for completely new areas which are not covered by the emission trading until now. And that very often requires huge investment. Of course, it might make production of certain products like cement, iron, steel, aluminium, fertilizers, or electricity more expensive. And therefore, what we want to do to prevent, from one side, carbon leakage, and from our side, also to motivate and stimulate the effort of our international partners to do what they promised when they've been signing the Paris Agreement. Go emission-free, go greener, invest in the new technology. And we will be as fair as we could be, as if you want to export your products into the EU market. And if you have emission trading scheme, and if you actually include the carbon price in your product, we are fine. If not, we need to level up the playing field, so we would see that if you do not invest in the new technologies, then, of course, you have to buy this carbon price differential when you are exporting your goods into the European Union. That's the logic behind the CBAM. I know that you're 100% informed about that, but I think it's very important to put it into the general context. And we have, of course, a very close discussion on this with our UK partners, because their environmental agenda, I think, is as ambitious as ours. They will be now leading the efforts in the COP26, and therefore we definitely will continue to debate this issue as well. But what it mean concretely for the question you asked related to Northern Ireland? We indeed consider that the carbon border adjustment mechanism, when adopted by the EU, will be an act which falls within the scope of the protocol. And as far as we know, the UK government has also recognized that. There is the mechanism in the protocol for making a new union act falling within the scope of the protocol, such as CBAM regulation, also applicable to the Northern Ireland. I will be working, therefore, very closely with the UK, with Northern Ireland, to ensure that the mechanism applies to products within its scope that will enter the Union through Northern Ireland. And I'm sure that what is also very important to state, it's not going to happen tomorrow. We know how complex this proposal is, how demanding this would be, not only from the legislative, but also accounting, auditing, carbon content assessment point of view, and therefore it's something which is coming in the years to come. But I think sooner we start the discussion, better the businesses will be prepared, and least surprises we will have at the end of the process.
Yeah, just a small comment or reflection in some respects on the question. One of the key challenges and one of the key concerns for people about the protocol is this dynamic alignment in the future and what voice Northern Ireland will have in it. And Vivian's question asked you about what has been agreed with the UK. I think if we continue with this sense that, okay, what have you agreed with the UK without us knowing here, we'll perpetuate this sense that the protocol is something that is being done to Northern Ireland, as opposed to something which is being done with Northern Ireland. And I think it really reiterates or reinforces the point I was making earlier, that you need to have the Northern Ireland voice in here, as well as the UK voice. And I think that's an issue for the UK government, but I think with the UK and the EU taking responsibility for the protocol, I think on the EU side, there should be should be pressure put on the UK to ensure that their position does reflect views coming through from Northern Ireland.
If you allow to complement the comment of the professor, I totally agree with you. And I will also tell you that this is one of the issues which is very sensitive. And you know why. We are in Belfast, in Northern Ireland, and therefore we are ready for different types of engagement if we would be 100% sure that it would make things better and not worse. Therefore, we are consulting, asking, wanting to make sure that everyone, all communities, all representatives are fine with that, and therefore it's sometimes quite complex for us, and therefore we do our utmost. At the same time, we'll be very careful, very respectful of the situation in Northern Ireland, and of course any advice from the experts like you or from political representatives in these regards would be very much welcome. But I can tell you that for sure this would be on the agenda in my conversations with Lord Frost.
Thank you very much. I'll invite Ian Marshall now to ask a question. Ian is in the Institute for Food Security here, and until recently a senator in Shannon. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Katie. Vice President Šefčovič, it's a pleasure to have you in Belfast. I think your two-day visit goes some way to allay fears and concerns that no one's listening. I think it's hugely beneficial. And it's interesting because there's a Belfast movie just being released in November by Kenneth Branagh, and there's a really interesting line in it that says, and one of the characters says, if they don't understand you, they're not listening. And I think it's important because for us it's significant that everyone listens and that everyone understands. My question to yourself this morning is as follows. It's been widely documented that the protocol is part of a binding international treaty. Furthermore, it's been widely reported that the protocol can't be amended or changed. Surely Article 13.8
specifically makes provision for such amendments and changes, specifically when there's reference to subsequent agreements. Are the EU being disingenuous with its ability to amend the protocol to work for all the people of Northern Ireland?
Thank you very much, Mr. Maroš, also for this question, because I think it's very, very important one. I will start with the last part of your question. I think it's even difficult for me to describe, not to create the feeling that I'm overdoing it or I'm overplaying it. But I can tell you that the efforts which we put into the finding the best possible solution for Northern Ireland over the last 5 years been enormous. And I'm not talking about the thousands of hours of negotiating time of the negotiators, but I would say enormously detailed debates among the member states in the European Parliament, looking for every single opportunity how to find a solution which would be good for people of Northern Ireland, for all island economy, for peace, for stability. Simply, I have to say that sometimes when we are discussing the cost of protocol, cost of all these checks, so I simply do not find it right that EU is blamed for the cost of Brexit. You didn't have these checks, you didn't have these costs a year ago, and we didn't wanted it. We regret it until today very much. We would prefer to be, as close to you in all aspects as possible. Therefore, we very much wanted to have, preservation of the single market, customs union, different sort of situation. But simply the vision, the insistence of London on the type of Brexit the UK government favored was different. So this was the best possible we could do under these extremely difficult circumstances, and therefore you might have now, these comparisons that how frictionless is to export from NI to EU, and through how many different stages the exporters from the GB has to go when they're exporting to the EU. That was simply the decision made by the UK government, that they wanted to have that relationship at certain distance, which of course then puts you in the category of the third country, and requires all that, I would say, traditional checks and controls which are immanent part of free trade agreement. It's a free trade, it's not single market, and that's fundamental difference. And I think this year for the first time we see how different it is. We see yesterday, for example, one of the issues which we haven't mentioned today was every business leader in the meeting was complaining about labor shortage. Every single one of them. And I can tell you that it's not just a Northern Irish phenomenon. I mean, it's kind of paradox of post-COVID crisis that we've been all afraid that there will be a huge unemployment. But paradoxically, and of course it's a good news, we have a labor shortage. But again, in the EU, it's a bit easier because you have a free movement of people, so it's much easier to find the people to work. Here, it's a big problem, and we heard a lot of different ideas how to resolve it, and we'll see, what would be possible. Coming back to your very specific question, not to create the impression that I want to diverge from it. Indeed, if it comes to the final provision in Article 13, it relates to the relationship between protocol and subsequent agreements between EU and the UK. And just for the sake of clarity, what was meant at that time by the negotiators, because you know that the situation was pretty difficult at that time, was that we've been opening the doors for respect of the future trade and cooperation agreement. which was concluded in the late December 2020. And that was the reason for that clause, and therefore we do not see that this article would mean that it should be used to renegotiate the protocol. We think very clearly that if we want to resolve these issues quickly, by quickly I mean this year, if you want, we should focus really on the most important issues, or the most troubling elements, focus all our energy how to do that, and not to restart very difficult, highly political discussions which we had, which took us 5 years to complete, and which resulted in the only solution we've been able to find within the 5 years, and it was the protocol. So we are ready for exploring all the flexibilities, looking for all the possible solutions, but not to renegotiate the protocol.
I think just a small note on Article 13.8. I think when the trade negotiations started on the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, there was an opportunity there for the UK and the EU to reach agreements which would actually negate the need for some elements of the protocol. But from my understanding is it was never raised as something which the UK government wanted to pursue. So I think, okay, for example, if the UK and the EU did reach an agreement on SPS, a veterinary agreement or something, that could actually be one way in which you could remove elements of the protocol. But for the moment, there's obviously been a political choice there, and the UK government's not keen to do something like that.
Maybe I can just complement your answer by the fact that, as you know, I was kind of brought into the game in April of last year as a co-chair of the, at that time, Joint Committee for the Withdrawal Agreement, and then we had, of course, this very difficult moment in the autumn by the Internal Market Bill and by the situations which was on the verge of collapse if it comes to the negotiations on TCA. And at that time we had extremely intense negotiating sessions with Chancellor Go on how to resolve some of the differences. I would say the same differences we are discussing until now, you know, how to deal with the access of the EU in the IT system, so we can see what are the flows across the borders, how to deal with certain SPS issues, what kind of grace periods are needed, you know, to get UK and Northern Ireland ample time to get ready, to be prepared, even though you know very well that the protocol and withdrawal agreement been signed and ratified in February, so we thought that in 8 months it should be fine. Then we discovered in December that that's not the case, and I was asking myself, my UK partners, how much time do you need to be ready for this, for that, for other things? That was the result of the grace period. We agreed to that. As you know, Number 10 was very pleased with that result. I think it created very positive momentum, which in the end led to the signature and ratification of the TCA, which is again unique agreement. We call it the agreement of the new generation, covering not only, I would say, the trade and cooperation, but also respect for standards in the area of social affairs, environment, level playing field, and so on and so forth. So it's indeed very, very unique, special, and good agreement. And we thought that, you know, great, by the end of the year, we understand how the protocol will be implied. We have the TCA. We start the new relationship. But again, I mean, we see that these problems persist, that we have to focus on them again. And I hope that also my meetings here, my discussion with Late Frost would create the same positive momentum as we created in the December last year, and would help us to pave the way for, I would say, mutual understanding among all of us to make sure that the protocol is properly implemented. It's done in a way that it's for the benefit of all people on Northern Ireland, all the communities, and we can focus on positive agenda. That's the goal.
Thank you very much. I've been given one job and I'm determined to do it correctly. And so I will advise you that we've got 10 minutes left and we have 3 questions. With the greatest respect, if I ask for concision in the asking of the questions and the answering, I'd be very grateful. The next question comes from Dylan Wilkinson, who's a PhD student in law here at Queen's. Thanks, Dylan.
Thank you, Professor Hayward. I'll just get right to it then.
Thank you.
Recent economic reports have confirmed significant trade diversion in Northern Ireland by the Republic of Ireland. If the protocol is implemented in full and this causes greater trade diversion, can the likely adverse political implications of this confirm that the protocol's objective of protecting the Good Friday Agreement is impossibly achieved in its current form?
Thank you very much for these questions, and also we discussed it at great length also yesterday with the business leaders. I would say that the first conclusion I would make is that it's too early to tell, because it's less than 10 months the protocol has been in the operation. Second conclusion I can tell you from our yesterday's discussion is that indeed more goods consumed in Northern Ireland are now locally produced, which I think in the end it's a good thing, that local producers are much more present on the local market. And then my experience with the trade is that this is not a static thing, that the business operators, they go through the constant adaptation. They look for better opportunities, they look for new partners, and therefore I think we will be able to judge it later on. But I think that we should a little bit shift the debate on the protocol from looking at it as something which is problematic, but something which is really creating enormous opportunity. And I can tell you that 2/3 of the discussions yesterday with the business leaders been about opportunity. 1/3 was about problems we have to solve, and it seems that there is a lot of ideas how we can do that. And I think they need our help as politicians to bring what they all been repeating: stability, predictability, legal clarity, positive environment. This is, I think, what we should focus on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Dr. Lisa Wisson, who's an early career researcher on the post-Brexit governance in Ireland.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Vice President Šefčovič, for being here. Good news for timekeeping. You've already touched on the subject of my question, but perhaps just for emphasis. A key governance challenge for post-Brexit Northern Ireland relates to the complexity of implementing aspects of EU law alongside domestic law, both UK-wide and Northern Ireland-specific. At the minute, a lack of transparency surrounding the activities of the protocol oversight bodies make managing this implementation more difficult. So my question, therefore, is what EU plans are there, or if there are, to help mitigate the complexity of post-Brexit governance in Northern Ireland by improving transparency of the protocol oversight bodies? Thank you.
I think, as you rightly pointed out, that I partly responded to the question you raised, but if you allow me to add a couple of more elements to it. As I said, we'll be discussing with the Northern Irish partners, with David Frost, what would be the best approach of closer consultation, more involvement of Northern Irish stakeholders in to this, I would say, overall process of policy making, legislative proposals being debated, put on the table, and we have to find some common understanding how to do it in the best possible way. I think we have to discuss together how to use more efficiently a joint consultative working group. I'm glad that yesterday I had the chance to talk to the First Minister and also to the deputy of the First Deputy Minister about these issues, because it would also require the good preparation of the Northern Irish executive expert with the good questions, with the proper preparation for this, for them to make sure that this joint consultative group is useful, that they are well prepared, they can absorb the information, they can spread the information within. And it's not only the issue for Northern Ireland. I'm from the new member state, I'm from Slovakia. I can tell you that we struggle with that until today, and it's already quite some time since we are the members. And then, of course, there is another issue where we want to make it more user-friendly. We are planning to set up a special dedicated website for the pieces of legislation which should be of particular interest and importance for Northern Ireland, just to make it easier for the stakeholders in Northern Ireland to go through what I understand is sometimes very, very complex decision-making processes and proposal setting mechanisms in Brussels. And then also I think we would need to discuss also with you as a representative of academic world how to better involve Northern Ireland in our public consultations. I mean, I'm responsible for that, for so-called better regulation in the EU, and we are very proud that according to the OECD, the public consultation system of the EU is best in the world. So I think it would be good if the Northern Ireland could be part of it.
I think that's all welcome, but I think you also highlight a point which I think we need to be considering in Northern Ireland, of how do we actually get the Northern Ireland voice together, and what is the role here of the Northern Ireland Executive? And one could argue that the Northern Ireland Executive has not necessarily been playing the role it should have been playing in trying to ensure that it can have effective engagement with the EU in a substantive way on the issues which are before it.
Thank you, David. And our final question comes from Colin Harvey, who's Professor of Human Rights in the School of Law here at Queen's.
Thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much for your engagement and listening over the last few days. And as you said, we very much hope this is the beginning of something, of an ongoing process of listening and engagement. I also want to welcome you to Queen's in this fantastic event. It's so wonderful to be back in the Great Hall again today for this, so very much welcome you to Queen's. I suppose many people here want to constructively work towards the future, and in that vein have focused very much on the need for a special arrangement in this society that the protocol reflects. And they see the potential benefits and opportunities for this region in the protocol. So my question is, and I do have a question in all of this, is focusing on the future, focusing constructively on where this is going next. You have rightly pointed out the opportunities that are there on the protocol. So first of all, I would like you to perhaps tell us a bit more about what those opportunities are. And then from following on from that, and you've said a bit about this already, is it how you plan to work and how the European Union plans to work with the Northern Ireland Executive, the Assembly, with civil society, with universities, and you'll always be welcome here at Queen's to maximise the potential and the opportunities we've talked about. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Harvey. Thank you for your kind words and also for sharing I would say the very common sentiment in the room, and it's nice to be back in the in the room, meeting people, debating face to face, important and at the same time very interesting topics. And of course, I mean, the question you just said, it's the last one, and I think it very well frames not only the debate we have here in this beautiful great hall of your very important and historic Queen's University, but also the nature of the debates I had over here over the last 2 days. First, I'm glad that you said the word opportunities, because this word was somehow lost in sometimes very difficult political noise around the protocol. And opportunity, that was the primary goal, which was driving definitely the EU negotiators, EU political representatives when proposing the protocol, when looking for the closest possible relationship with the UK despite Brexit. That was what we wanted. That was what we wanted to do. Now we have the framework which we debated at length this morning, and I think that we should focus indeed on opportunities, and through the length of the opportunities, try to put all the energy in resolving the remaining obstacles. I think that should be the logic. And opportunities indeed are enormous, because and it's not only your business leaders who told me that yesterday. When I'm talking to different business stakeholders in Brussels, everybody understands what kind of unique, I would quote yesterday's statement, dual opportunity this presents, or dual market participation, as somebody called it yesterday, represent for business operatives, for Canadian companies, for American companies, for European companies. I'm sure that you know that our Norwegian friends are paying for the participation in single market, something to the tune of 5 billion euros for the financial perspective. Northern Ireland has it for free. On top of it, you are English speakers. You have excellent research institutes. I heard a lot about your aerospace industry. You have very vibrant farming sector. You have excellent labor force, and as we heard yesterday, not enough of the labor force for the thriving businesses. And you know the EU, you know the UK, and you have 500 million customers of unparalleled purchasing power. Let's not forget it. Unparalleled purchasing power. And therefore, I would say the Canadians, Americans, and others know this opportunity, and they are developing different kind of investment projects. But of course, for every investor, what is the key is that you want to focus on your business. You do not want to deal with some kind of outside problems, because to start the business is not easy. And therefore, it was unanimous message from all the business leaders: stability, predictability, legal clarity, and also dial down the rhetoric, dial down the political noise, because sometimes even as we as a Northern Irish exporters in the EU are asked the question, are you really on the single market? And that's also a role for us to make sure that also the business communities across the European Union are correctly informed, and that's our duty to do that, and we will. So what I want to say that from this perspective, the opportunities are enormous. But what was very important yesterday, and I'm on the academic soil, so I will repeat it, the Article 2 discussions, human rights, values, the women's rights, education, social standards, equality issues. This is something which is, I would say, part of our DNA in the European Union, and I believe they're part of your DNA. So it's just natural that we want to communicate, debate, and we have the framework for that. So that's another, I would say, huge opportunity which we shouldn't miss. And the last point I would like to make, I made quite detailed speech in Bruges on the overall vision for our relationship between EU and the UK. It might take some time, but I believe that we are closest of allies. We are neighbors forever. We are sharing the common security threats. We are sharing common economic space. Most of the Europeans now speak English, so we can understand each other well. And therefore, I think that close cooperation in all fields, from climate change down to the security cooperation, is just a natural next step, and I believe we would evolve it. And of course, Northern Ireland could be that very important bridge, which would be in the single market, on the internal market, and where our shared responsibilities should be managed very well together with our UK partners. So that would be the note on which I would like to conclude, because I believe that the opportunities are enormous, but we have to overcome the obstacles which are now ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice President. I will hand over now to the Vice Chancellor to close.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. The privilege falls to me to thank Vice President Šefčovič, not just for his address, but for that question and answer session, which I think I would echo in Marshall's view was hugely beneficial. And I certainly look forward to seeing the impact of your visit, and perhaps more importantly, your approach. Colin Harvey pointed out that it had been one of listening and engagement, and I think we all welcome that style. We wish you every success in the discussions and negotiations going forward, in finding an inclusive way ahead for Northern Ireland, and I hope we can welcome you back to Queen's and to Northern Ireland in a future date. So thank you again. Finally, in closing, can I ask the audience to stay seated until you're advised to leave in the interests of social distancing and security. So thank you again, Vice President Šefčovič.
Thank you for the ball. Welcome, Professor, and thank you very much for hosting me and for your engaging questions, and we'll make sure that we'll come back. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.